Hey everyone, welcome to WittCode, where in this video we're going to learn how to connect a Node application to OpenAI using the OpenAI NPM package. So as a demonstration here, we're using the model GPT-3.5 Turbo. We'll learn what this means and everything in this video. We're having a conversation with this model. We're giving it a personality right here, and then we're asking it what is the most famous dinosaur. And let's see what happens if we run this. So we're going to run it with just npm start, and what we get back, content, oh, you don't know. The most famous dinosaur is probably the T-Rex. It's kind of a big deal. So we can see how I've given it a personality for being sassy, and we can start a conversation. So for example here, we'll learn more about this as we go on, but what you would want to do after this is you would add the role here of the assistant, which is essentially the model we're talking with, and the content is its response right here. So we would put it like this, and then we could essentially keep this conversation going. But I'll have more videos that go in depth on stuff like that. For this, we're just going to show how to connect with OpenAI. But so before we begin, let's talk about what OpenAI is. So OpenAI is an artificial intelligence research organization that provides services such as ChatGPT, Codex, and the OpenAI API, which is what we're working with right here. This API allows developers to interact with OpenAI by providing input to a specified model. For example, we can provide text to DALL-E 3, which is an image model, to generate an image. We can provide an image to GPT-4 Turbo, which is a language model, to generate a text response. We can even provide an MP3 file to a model called Whisper to generate text. Of course, we would provide these models here, but there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with this OpenAI package. However, to use the OpenAI API, you need to have an OpenAI account. So essentially, I'll paste these links in the description, but you would either have to log in if you already have one or sign up by going to platformopenai.com/signup. From here, you would create an account. You can sign in with Google, of course. So I will just continue with Google. But so this is the OpenAI website. And the next thing we would need to do is go over here. See if I can zoom this in actually. We would need to go to the left side over here, and we need to generate an API key. And so an API key, which can be found at this URL, platform, and I'll include this in the description, but platform.openai.com/API keys. So what an API key is it's used to identify the user or project calling the API. And you should note that API keys should be kept safe or kept secret, as they are often linked to usage data. So for example, I have a key right here, but it's linked to usage. So when you're using this, the OpenAI API, you can see how it's linked to what we're doing. So right here, that command I ran with the AI or using OpenAI cost less than 1 cent. But if someone had my API key and was running this, it would be charging me and not them, which is why you want to make sure that you keep your API key safe when you generate it. And actually when you generate it in here, so if you generate an API key right here, you won't be able to see it again. You can only view it when you first create it. So if you lose that one, you'll need to generate another one. And before we get going, let's also talk about payment. So this stuff can be kind of scary sometimes, I think, using a service that you have to pay for. But when you create an account initially, your account, you will have a tier, an account tier, and it'll be set to free. And this means that you'll basically have $5 right here to spend on the OpenAI before you have to change to a paid account. So, and also if you don't use this $5 within 3 months, it will expire. And the way OpenAI manages its payment is through tokens. So let me find a URL on this actually. So I think it's OpenAI pricing. If we look in here, we can see all this talk about tokens, and tokens are essentially words that are divided into input and output tokens, where input is what's provided to the model and output is what the model gives back. And different models, like we were using GPT-3.5 Turbo, which is basically a less improved language model of GPT-4, it costs significantly less to use, which is why we were using that one. So it's about 50 cents for 1 million tokens. So what I did, of course, that was probably around 60 tokens and cost like less than a penny, but this is where you can find all this data. So you also have language models or image models like this right here. So if you want to generate an image, it's like 4 cents an image. If you increase to HD, it's 80, things like that. But that's just an example, but you should have $5 to spend when you initially create an account. And also if you can set limits. So for example, I set a limit to $10. So if I spend more than $10, it'll cut me off essentially. And when that happens, you'll get sent something similar to this right here. So something that'll say rate limit 429, you exceeded your current quota. So You can set limits to make sure you're not overspending, things like that, in case that makes you a bit nervous. But so that's all we have to do with the setup. Now let's actually just create this project. So to start out, I'm just going to have an empty directory. And what we want to do first is initialize this as an npm project with npm init es6-y. This will create a package.json with the type set to module, so we can use more modern syntax. And next, let's install our OpenAI API. So OpenAI provides a JavaScript client to interact with our API, and it's called OpenAI, just like this. So once we've installed it, we can see it down here. And now let's set the entry point of our application. So we're actually going to create a source folder here, and inside that an index.js file, and that's the entry point to our application. So we're going to change this to .-source-index.js, and then we're going to have a simple start script where it's just going to run our entry point. So this right here represents our entry point. But now we've got that boring stuff out of the way, let's actually query. And what we're going to query is the GPT-3.5 Turbo model. And the way to do this is we first import the OpenAI library, and then we instantiate an object from it. And what we need to provide to it is our API key. And this is, of course, the one that you generated on the OpenAI website. And once again, note that you should keep this key secret, and a good place to keep API keys is in environment variables. But for practice, you can just paste in your key here. So you could just, whatever your key will be, something like that, you could just paste it right there. But it's a bad practice to place them directly into code. If you're using version control, stuff like that, other people can just look at your API keys. But now let's actually query the OpenAI API. And so I'm just going to paste in that function that we used earlier. And actually, this is an example that I got from their website. But essentially, there are many different models and APIs to choose from when working with OpenAI. And for this demonstration, we're going to be using the model GPT-3.5 Turbo, which is a language model. And so language models are trained to understand natural language, code, images, and then output text in response. And then we're using the chat completions API, seen right here, which is basically used to generate text based on a list of messages. So here are the messages that we're providing to our GPT 3.5 Turbo. And with each of these messages, we can see we have a role and a content. And the role can be either system, user, and assistant. And system is usually specified first, and that essentially sets the personality of whoever it is, or the AI model that you're talking to. The user is the user questions. Assistant is what the model has sent back in a response. So we can see the questions that we've asked here with setting this personality. But so essentially what we're going to do, so we're going to query the GPT 3.5 Turbo model, and then we're going to log out the response. And actually, the way we're going to log it out is we're going to stringify it, and we're going to add some formatting. So now let's run this, and let's see what we get. So to run it, we're going to use our npm start script that we wrote. And what we can see is the response from GPT 3.5 Turbo. And we can see here it says the World Series 2020 was played in yada yada and all this stuff. So we can see how the choices here are basically a list of chat completion choices, and each of these contains the message. So we can see it was from the model, and we can see the content of it. And some other important information is our usage. So here we can see our tokens. So the amount of tokens used in the prompt, the amount in the response, and the total. And so this will be used in billing, but 89 tokens is pretty minuscule because I think $1 million for GPT 3.5 Turbo is 50 cents. But this is all it takes to get working with OpenAI. I'm going to make quite a few videos on this, so if you're interested, please consider liking and subscribing. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll try and get back to you. But besides that, just have a good one.